It all started when she was told she couldn't sit in the seat she paid for, not because of anything she did wrong, but because of everything they assumed about her. The words hung in the air, just as heavy as the sting of injustice that had already begun to fester in Jada Taylor's chest. She'd been traveling for over 5 hours from New York to Los Angeles, enduring delays and cramped spaces, fighting for an inch of comfort, just to be told that she couldn't sit where she had booked her seat. It wasn't a mistake, no. It wasn't an issue with the system. It was racism. Jada was no stranger to being underestimated. As a successful businesswoman, she had earned everything she had through sheer grit and determination. But no matter how much she accomplished, no matter how many deals she sealed or promotions she earned, there were always those who saw her as something less. Something that didn't belong. She stood in the narrow aisle, her carry-on bag clutched tightly in her hand, a nervous knot forming in her stomach as she stared at the flight attendant. The young woman, barely more than 20, was pointing at a man sitting comfortably in her seat. He had his legs stretched out and a cocky smile on his face, oblivious to the tension mounting around him. "I'm sorry, miss," the flight attendant said, her voice tight, "but we need you to move. That man has been upgraded to your seat." Jada's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. She'd purchased that ticket months ago. She had gone through all the right channels, followed every rule, and yet now, some white man who was clearly less deserving was sitting in her seat as if he owned it. "I don't think you understand," Jada said, her voice calm but firm. "I paid for that seat. It's mine." The flight attendant blinked, clearly taken aback by Jada's confident demeanor, but she refused to back down. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you'll need to take a different seat. We can accommodate you in the back if that's more comfortable." Jada felt her heart race. She could feel the heat of anger rising in her chest, but she knew she couldn't allow herself to lose control. She had to make them understand, even if it meant standing her ground. "I'm not moving," she said, her voice growing stronger now, her gaze fixed on the flight attendant. "I'm sitting in the seat I paid for, and if you want me to move, you're going to have to physically remove me." The flight attendant's eyes flickered nervously, and she turned to another attendant, who was standing in the galley with his arms crossed. The attendant looked at Jada for a long moment, then exchanged a glance with a man in a crisp suit, who had just entered the cabin. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked, his voice cold, his tone demanding. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and his face was one of those faces that people would automatically defer to, even before hearing what he had to say. Jada had seen enough powerful white men in her life to know exactly what type of person he was. Someone who assumed his authority over everyone else. "This is my seat," Jada repeated, holding up her boarding pass, her fingers trembling just slightly from the rising frustration. "I paid for it." The man glanced at the boarding pass, then at Jada, before his eyes moved to the man sitting in the seat she had been assigned. Without hesitation, he turned back to Jada and spoke in a tone so dismissive it made her stomach churn. "It's simple really," he said, his lip curling. "This is a first-class seat and he's a paying customer. You're just a woman with a small-time business who can barely afford to sit here, let alone make a fuss. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have more important matters to attend to." The weight of his words hit Jada like a slap to the face. She had heard these types of things her whole life. She had been told she wasn't enough, told she wasn't meant to be where she was, as if every achievement she had fought for wasn't real. But today was different. She didn't back down. She couldn't. "No, you don't get to speak to me like that," Jada said, her voice low but carrying an undeniable power. "You don't get to dismiss me or treat me like I'm invisible. I've worked too hard for too long to let someone like you strip me of my dignity. I will sit in this seat, and I will be treated with respect, or there will be consequences." The man scoffed, his hands moving to adjust his suit jacket, clearly unbothered. But Jada could feel the shift in the room. People were watching. The tension in the air was palpable, and for the first time in her life, she felt a surge of energy rising within her, a strength she had never realized was there. "Is this really necessary?" the flight attendant asked, her voice shaking now. "We can find you another seat, miss." But Jada shook her head. "I'm not moving. And I'm not going to let you treat me like this." The man, realizing that his usual tactics weren't working, called over the head flight attendant, a man in his 50s who looked like he had been flying for decades. He had a quiet, unshakable presence, and the other flight attendants immediately deferred to him. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, looking between Jada and the man in the seat. "This woman is refusing to move from a first-class seat," the man in the suit said, his voice filled with contempt. "She's causing a scene." Jada took a deep breath, feeling her chest tighten. She wasn't about to let this man decide her worth. "No," she said, standing straighter, her voice steady and calm. "I'm not causing a scene. He's the one who doesn't belong in my seat. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's time you understood that we won't let people like you walk all over us anymore." The head flight attendant looked between them, and for a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Maybe it was respect, maybe it was fear. Whatever it was, it gave Jada the courage to keep going. The man in the suit took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm done here," he said. "You'll be escorted off the plane if you don't move." Jada's heart pounded. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was about everything. About every injustice she had ever faced. About every moment she had been silenced or overlooked. She had already paid the price for so many of these battles, but now she wasn't going to back down. "I'm not going anywhere," Jada said, her voice ringing through the cabin. "Not unless you force me. But mark my words, if you do, I'll make sure you regret it." The flight attendant hesitated, and Jada could feel the weight of the room. The passengers were silent, watching the standoff. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, the flight attendant turned away and walked toward the cockpit. Jada stood there, her heart pounding, waiting. Would they force her off the plane? Or would they finally see that the power of one woman, standing her ground, was greater than the power of one man who thought he could control her? As the seconds ticked by, Jada realized that her fight wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about standing tall for every moment she had ever been pushed down. The silence that enveloped the cabin was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the plane's engines. Jada stood firm, her back straight and her gaze unwavering, as she awaited the flight attendant's decision. The tension in the air was palpable. It felt like the weight of the world rested on this single moment. The man in the suit had taken a seat across the aisle, arms crossed, watching her with a mixture of disbelief and disdain. His confidence, however, seemed to waver, like a house of cards about to collapse under its own weight. The other passengers, many of whom had been silent until now, watched her. She could feel their eyes on her, their judgment, their expectations. They were waiting to see how this would play out. Would she fold under pressure? Or would she emerge victorious, showing them all that the world didn't have to stay the way it was? Jada's mind raced as the minutes dragged on, but she refused to let the fear creep in. She had been down this road before, being the only black woman in the room, fighting for her voice to be heard over the louder, more dominant voices around her. But this time was different. She wasn't backing down. Finally, the head flight attendant returned, this time with the captain at his side. The captain, a middle-aged man with graying hair, looked at Jada with an unreadable expression. His eyes flicked between her and the man in the suit. It was clear that he was trying to figure out what had transpired, but the tension was thick. He had to make a decision. "Ma'am," the captain said, his voice professional, yet tinged with annoyance, "I need to ask you to move. This is a first-class seat, and it's already been allocated to another customer. You have a choice of seats in the economy section." Jada's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her cool. The humiliation was evident in his voice. He thought she would cave, he thought she was just another woman to be ignored and dismissed. But he was wrong. "I've already told you," Jada said, her voice even but filled with quiet fire. "I'm not going anywhere. Not until you move him." The captain's lips tightened into a thin line. He looked to the man in the suit, who was still sitting there with an air of superiority. "Sir, can you please take your seat?" the captain asked. The man in the suit, clearly caught off guard by the captain's request, shot a glare at Jada. He opened his mouth to protest, but the captain cut him off before he could speak. "This is not negotiable," the captain said firmly. "Either you move or I'll have to escalate this further." Jada felt a flicker of hope rise in her chest. There it was. The first crack in his armor. It was small, but it was there. The captain wasn't going to let this man walk all over her. He was forcing him to face the consequences of his actions. The man in the suit stood up slowly, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath as he slid into the aisle. "You don't know who I am." Jada didn't respond. She didn't need to. She knew who she was. She was a woman who had worked her entire life for what she had, and no one was going to take that away from her. As he moved past her, he shot her one last look, his eyes filled with disdain as if to say, "This is far from over." But for Jada it was over. For him it was just the beginning. She took a deep breath and slid into the seat that was rightfully hers, not because she was being gracious or because she was trying to keep the peace, but because she knew she had earned it. Her heart was still pounding, but there was a sense of quiet victory settling within her. As the plane began its final preparations for takeoff, Jada glanced around the cabin. The other passengers were still watching, their gazes now filled with something different. Respect. Amazement. Even a few smiles. She realized then that she had done more than simply stand her ground. She had inspired something that no one had expected. But the battle wasn't over yet. The captain had returned to the front of the plane, his posture still stiff and professional, but Jada could see the subtle change in the way he carried himself now. He had seen her strength. He had seen her fight. He wasn't going to let the situation get out of hand, but he had witnessed something that made him question the way things were normally done. Jada leaned back in her seat, finally able to relax, even if just for a moment. She had won this round, but she knew the man in the suit would not let this go easily. He would be back, and when he returned, she would be ready. Hours passed, the plane cutting through the skies at cruising altitude, but the unease didn't leave Jada. The tension lingered like a shadow. She had known that this battle was more than just about a seat. It was about showing the world, once and for all, that the time for silence was over. But as much as she had stood her ground, she couldn't help but wonder, was she truly safe? As the lights dimmed for the night, Jada closed her eyes for a moment, trying to collect her thoughts. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she was met with a soft tap on her shoulder. Startled, she turned around to find the captain standing in the aisle, his expression serious. "Ma'am, could I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, his voice low. Jada's heart skipped a beat. She knew something was coming, but she wasn't sure what. Without waiting for a response, the captain led her toward the back of the plane, away from the other passengers. She followed, her mind racing with possibilities. What could he want? Was this a trap? Was he going to apologize, or was this the moment where everything would take a turn for the worse? They reached the back galley where the flight attendants were preparing snacks. The captain turned to her, his face serious, but something in his eyes hinted at urgency. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something," he began, his voice low. "That man you had the altercation with, he's not just some random passenger. He's a high-profile executive at one of the largest investment firms in the country. His connections, they go deep." Jada's stomach dropped. This was worse than she had anticipated. She knew this fight had been bigger than just a first-class seat, but she hadn't expected it to come with this kind of backlash. "The truth is," the captain continued, his voice almost a whisper, "his company has a lot of influence. And I'm afraid this won't be the last time you hear from him." Jada felt a chill run down her spine. The fight had only just begun. And this was the moment that would change everything. "What do you mean it won't be the last time?" Jada's voice was barely a whisper, but the gravity of the captain's words hit her like a sledgehammer. She had stood her ground on that plane, but now she was beginning to realize the full magnitude of what she had just done. This was no longer just about a seat. It was about a system. A system that had its claws deeply embedded in the power structures around her. The captain lowered his voice even further, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one could overhear them. "That man, his name is Derek Finch. He's been involved in corporate dealings that could make or break companies. And he's the kind of person who doesn't take rejection lightly. You've become a problem for him, Jada." Jada's mind was racing. She had assumed that her actions, though controversial, would at least be enough to make people rethink how they treated black women, especially those like her, successful, independent, and not afraid to speak up. But now, hearing that this man had the power to ruin her, to come after her in ways she couldn't even begin to understand, she felt a weight settle on her shoulders. It was as if every moment of her life had been building toward this one dangerous crossroads. She took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the galley counter, trying to steady herself. "So, what are you saying? That he's going to use his influence to get back at me?" The captain nodded solemnly, his brow furrowed with concern. "He's got connections everywhere. Lawyers, judges, people in high places. If he decides to retaliate, he can make your life very difficult, and no one would blink an eye. He's not the type of man who lets things like this slide. But what's worse," the captain's voice dropped even lower, "he's got a history. A history of using his power to intimidate people, to silence them." Jada felt the blood rush from her face. She had already been in battles before, personal, professional, and societal, but this was different. She wasn't fighting a battle where the rules were clear. She was fighting a war against someone who had the means to obliterate her with a single phone call. "Is that why you helped me back there?" Jada asked, her voice quivering slightly despite her best efforts to stay composed. "Because you knew he could hurt me?" The captain hesitated, looking over his shoulder again before stepping even closer. "I did what I thought was right. But I'm not blind, Jada. I'm not naive. I've seen how people like him operate. And I can tell you, standing up to him isn't going to come without a cost. If you're planning to keep fighting this, just know it's not going to be easy. Jada didn't speak for a long moment. The weight of the captain's words hung heavily in the air, but she wasn't ready to back down, not yet. Not when she had already come this far. "Thank you for the warning," she said, her voice hardening, "but I've been fighting all my life. I'm not going to let a man like him dictate my future. Not now, not ever." The captain gave her a long, searching look, and for a moment, Jada thought she saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You're a brave woman, Jada. Just be careful. There are people who play dirty when their backs are against the wall. And if he decides to go after you, you need to be prepared for what's coming." Jada nodded, but inside, a storm was brewing. She knew the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun, and she had to stay ready for whatever came next. Jada was sitting at her desk in her office, the low hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above her head, when the email notification popped up on her screen. It was from her lawyer, and the subject line made her stomach twist. "Cease and desist. Defamation and disruption of airline operations." Jada's fingers hovered over the mouse as she clicked open the message. As the email loaded, she scanned the text, her pulse quickening as she read through the words. It was a legal letter, filled with formal language, but the message was clear. Derek Finch was coming for her, and he was not wasting time. He had filed a lawsuit claiming that Jada's actions on the plane had caused significant damage to his reputation and the airline's operations. The letter threatened legal consequences, heavy ones, if she didn't retract her statements and apologize for her disruptive behavior during the flight. Jada's blood ran cold. This was the first blow. But it wouldn't be the last. She knew this man wouldn't stop until he had destroyed everything she had worked so hard for. But she wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. Not without a fight. Her lawyer had already sent back a response, rejecting the accusations and making it clear that they would not be retracting anything. But Jada couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. If Finch was willing to go this far, how far would he push before she was completely backed into a corner? The phone on her desk rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. She picked it up, her heart still racing from the email. "Jada Taylor," she answered, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension building inside her. "Jada," her lawyer's voice came through, calm but urgent. "I need you to listen carefully. We've just received word that Finch's legal team is trying to dig up dirt on you. They're looking into every aspect of your life. Business dealings, personal history, anything they can use to tear you down." Jada's throat tightened. This wasn't just about the flight anymore. This man was relentless. "Are they serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid so. But don't worry, we're not letting them get away with this. We've got our own team on it. But Jada, I need you to be prepared for what's coming. This is going to get ugly." Jada leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. She wasn't going to let this man break her. She had fought too hard for too long. This wasn't just about one moment on a plane, it was about everything she had overcome to get to this point. She wasn't about to let Derek Finch take that away from her. The days after receiving the legal threat felt like a slow descent into a nightmare. Jada had always prided herself on being prepared for anything. After all, the world wasn't kind to women like her. But this felt different. It wasn't just about a business deal gone wrong or a bad day at the office. It was about her very existence being challenged, questioned, and threatened by someone who had the means to destroy everything she had built. She spent the next few days in a haze of meetings, phone calls, and legal discussions. Her lawyer, Olivia, had assured her that they had a strong case, but Jada knew this wasn't going to be a simple courtroom battle. Derek Finch wasn't playing by the same rules. He wasn't the kind of person who cared about fairness. He had connections that could make or break her in ways that no legal team could protect her from. Jada wasn't naive. She knew that no matter how hard she fought, there were forces at play she couldn't even begin to understand. And that terrified her. On the third day after the lawsuit, Jada was sitting in her office late into the evening, reviewing documents and trying to prepare her strategy. The soft click of the door opening startled her, and she looked up to see Olivia standing in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. "What is it?" Jada asked, her voice tight. "I've just received a call from someone in Finch's circle," Olivia said, her voice shaky. "They're not just targeting you in the courtroom. They've started to spread rumors about your business, saying it's in financial trouble, that your investors are pulling out, that you're a liability to the industry. They're attacking your reputation, Jada. And they're doing it quietly behind the scenes. I don't know how far this will go." Jada felt a chill creep down her spine. This was no longer just a lawsuit. This was an all-out attack, one designed to erode her credibility and tear apart the foundation of her career. Are you serious? Jada's voice was barely above a whisper, her hands clenched into fists on the desk. This man is trying to ruin me. Olivia nodded. Yes. And the worst part? He's got people in your industry in your circle. There's a chance they've already started whispering about you, trying to undermine your position. Jada stood up from her desk, a rush of adrenaline flooding her system. She had fought too hard, built too much, to let this man destroy her with rumors and lies. The fight had changed. It was no longer just about a seat on an airplane, it was about her livelihood, her legacy, her very place in the world. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to take the fight to him. As the weeks went on, Jada made every effort to keep her business running smoothly, to continue showing up every day and pretending like everything was fine. But behind the scenes, things were starting to unravel. Investors were starting to ask questions, and the whispers about her sinking ship were growing louder. But Jada wasn't about to let anyone dictate her future. She knew exactly how the system worked, the same system that had kept women like her out of boardrooms, out of power. She wasn't just going to sit back and let Derek Finch play the game. She enlisted the help of a private investigator, someone she knew would be able to uncover the truth. She needed to know how deep Finch's influence went. Who was he working with? Who in her circle had been feeding him information? And most importantly, what was his next move? It didn't take long for the investigator to get back to her with shocking news. Finch wasn't just using his connections to spread rumors. He had hired a PR firm to smear her name publicly, to create a false narrative about her company's financial stability, and to plant seeds of doubt in her investor network. He was using everything at his disposal to slowly chip away at her reputation, one rumor at a time. The investigator also uncovered something else, something even more troubling. Finch had ties to several prominent figures in the media. It was clear now that he wasn't just a businessman. He was a puppet master pulling strings behind the scenes, manipulating public opinion to do his bidding. Jada's heart sank as she absorbed the full extent of the situation. She wasn't just fighting for her career. She was fighting against a system that had the power to erase her existence with a single well-placed lie. Jada knew that she couldn't keep fighting this battle alone. She had already lost so much. Her peace of mind, her sense of security, and now, with the public attack on her reputation, she had to make a choice. She could either continue to play by the rules, or she could take the gloves off and fight dirty, just like Derek Finch had been doing all along. She called a meeting with Olivia and her team of legal and PR experts, laying out her strategy. We're not just going to defend ourselves. We're going on the offensive, Jada said, her voice cold and determined. I want to find every single person Finch has been talking to, every person he's been spreading lies to, and I want them exposed. Publicly. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Jada, this could get messy. If we start dragging people into this, it could cause even more damage. I don't care, Jada replied, her tone unyielding. He's already tried to destroy me. I'm not going to sit back and let him get away with it. We need to show the world who he really is. Jada's plan was dangerous, but she was past the point of caring. If Derek Finch wanted a war, he was going to get one. She wasn't going to let him use his connections to tear down everything she had fought for. Her team got to work, digging into every part of Finch's empire, using every resource at their disposal to uncover the lies he had been spreading. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered something even more shocking. Finch wasn't just trying to ruin Jada's reputation. He was also involved in some very shady business dealings of his own. Deals that, if exposed, could bring his entire empire crashing down. Jada knew this was her moment. She could either go public with this information and risk everything, or she could keep playing it safe, hiding behind the walls of her legal team. But Jada had never been the type to back down. She was going to take this fight straight to Finch's doorstep. The truth has a way of rising to the surface no matter how deep you bury it. The weeks following the discovery of Derek Finch's shady dealings were a whirlwind of action. Jada and her team had become relentless, pouring every ounce of energy they had into uncovering the dirt that Finch had so carefully hidden. She had always known the power of a good story, of the truth when it was wielded correctly, but she had never imagined she would find herself in the midst of one this explosive. It was all too easy to play the victim. Too easy to sit back and let the powers that be decide her fate, like so many women of color had done before her. But Jada was no ordinary woman. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been silenced, for every woman who had ever been told she couldn't have it all, for every underdog who had been forced to take a back seat while the so-called powerful rode in the front. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. This was about taking back control of her life, her reputation, and her future. And Jada was about to make sure that Derek Finch would regret ever crossing her. Jada sat at the head of the long conference table, her legal and PR team spread out in front of her, each working tirelessly to gather the evidence they needed to turn the tables on Finch. She had already made her mind up. It was time to expose him. It was time to make sure that everyone knew exactly what kind of man he was. "Here's the full list of his connections," Olivia said, sliding a folder across the table toward Jada. "We've traced every phone call, every email, every deal he's made with some of the biggest names in the industry. It's not pretty." Jada opened the folder, her eyes scanning the details. It was all there, the network of people Finch had used to manipulate the system, the lies he had spread to destroy competitors, and the shady deals he'd made under the table. This wasn't just about a man trying to crush her. This was about a man who had spent his entire career using people as pawns, destroying anyone who dared to stand in his way. But there was one piece of evidence that stood out among the rest. One piece that could shatter everything Finch had built. The email. The one that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Finch had been behind the campaign to discredit her. It was a direct message from his personal account to a PR firm, outlining the exact strategy they were to use to attack her business, to create a false narrative, and to destroy her credibility in the eyes of her investors. It was the smoking gun she had been waiting for. Olivia's voice broke through her thoughts. "Jada, we have a choice. We can release this evidence publicly and expose him for what he is, or we can keep pushing back legally. But the longer we wait, the more damage he does." Jada knew what she had to do. "We're going public. He's not just going to walk away from this. I'm taking him down." Olivia hesitated for a moment, her brow furrowed. "Are you sure? Once we release this, there's no going back. Finch will come after you harder than before." Jada met Olivia's gaze, her resolve unwavering. "Let him. I've already come this far. If I don't do this now, I'm going to lose everything. We expose him, we win this war." It was time. The following day, Jada sat in front of the camera, her face calm but her heart racing. She had made the decision. She wasn't going to wait for Derek Finch to destroy her. She was going to do something no one expected. She was going to fight back in a way that would leave him no choice but to back down. The video started rolling and Jada spoke directly to the camera. "I am Jada Taylor and I'm not here to play by the rules. I'm here to make sure the truth is heard, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. 4 weeks, I've been the target of a smear campaign, orchestrated by a man who thought he could control me with lies. A man named Derek Finch." Jada's words were measured, deliberate. Derek Finch is a high-powered businessman who has spent years manipulating the system to get what he wants. But the truth is, he's not invincible. And today, I'm exposing the truth about the campaign he's waged against me. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. "I have proof. I have emails, communications, and evidence that show how Finch has used his power to create lies about my business, to undermine my reputation, and to discredit me in front of my investors. This isn't just business, this is personal. And I won't let it stand." The video cut to images of the email exchanges, the documents detailing the conspiracy, the PR firm hired to spread false rumors. Everything was laid bare for the world to see. There was no hiding anymore. Finch's dirty secrets were out in the open, and there was no going back. Jada's video went viral. Within hours, it had spread across social media, news outlets, and business circles. People were stunned. The powerful man who had built his empire on deceit and manipulation was now being exposed for what he truly was. But as the world reacted to Jada's brave move, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Derek Finch wouldn't just sit back and let this slide. He would fight back, and he would use every tool at his disposal to tear her down. True to Jada's predictions, the backlash was swift. Finch's legal team filed another round of lawsuits, claiming defamation and demanding that Jada retract her statements. His allies in the media began running counter-narratives, attempting to spin the story in his favor, casting Jada as a disgruntled employee trying to ruin the reputation of a successful businessman. But Jada wasn't afraid anymore. She had already taken the first step, and she wasn't about to let him silence her. The support she was receiving from her followers, her investors, and her allies in the business world was growing. People were rallying behind her, standing up for justice in a way they had never done before. She couldn't stop now. She had come too far. The next few weeks were a blur. Jada found herself in a war of words, of legal filings and media battles. Every day felt like a battle for survival, but with each passing day she grew stronger. She had come to understand that the fight wasn't just about winning in court, it was about the principle of it all. It was about proving that the truth would always rise, no matter how many people tried to bury it. Then one day a breakthrough came. Jada's investigator uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. Derek Finch had been involved in an illegal insider trading scheme with some of his closest business partners, something that had been covered up for years. And with this discovery, everything began to unravel for him. Jada's legal team filed an amended lawsuit, adding charges of fraud and financial misconduct to the original defamation claim. Finch's empire, built on lies and deceit, was finally beginning to crumble. And just like that, the tables turned. The war may be won, but the final battle is still on the horizon. The truth has been revealed, but what will be the ultimate cost of standing up against a powerful adversary like Derek Finch? Stay tuned as Jada's fight for justice continues. When the truth catches up with you, there's nowhere left to run. Jada couldn't have imagined how quickly the tides could turn. After weeks of battling Derek Finch's legal team, of enduring smear campaigns and public attacks, it seemed as though the world was finally starting to notice what she had been saying all along. Derek Finch was a fraud. And now, with the final pieces of evidence in her hands, Jada knew she had to push the final blow. Her legal team worked tirelessly to prepare their next move, bringing forward the insider trading revelations with all the weight they could muster. It wasn't just about the defamation or the rumors that had been spread, it was about the financial crimes, the manipulation, and the deceit that had been hidden for years. With each passing day, Finch's empire of lies crumbled further, as news outlets, investors, and even some of his closest allies began to turn on him. The media storm that followed Jada's release of the final evidence was nothing short of a spectacle. News outlets across the country picked up the story, detailing Finch's financial crimes, his involvement in fraudulent activities, and the manipulation of the system that allowed him to thrive while others suffered. The public, once skeptical of Jada's claims, now had no choice but to see the truth for what it was. But even as the walls closed in on Finch, he didn't go down without a fight. His legal team fought back with everything they had, counter lawsuits, media spin, and even public appearances designed to paint him as the victim. But it was all in vain. As the investigations grew deeper, more and more of his illegal activities came to light. The final nail in his coffin was the discovery of illegal financial transactions between Finch and several high-profile investors, transactions that violated multiple federal laws. It was a scandal of epic proportions. Jada watched as Derek Finch was led out of his office in handcuffs, his face pale and devoid of the arrogance that had once defined him. The fall of the man who had tried to destroy her, who had tried to make her disappear with lies and manipulation, was a sight she would never forget. She had stood tall in the face of his attacks, refused to be silenced, and in the end, the truth had triumphed. The media coverage of Finch's arrest was relentless, his reputation forever tarnished by the exposure of his crimes. And Jada? She stood as the undeniable hero of the story. No longer just a businesswoman fighting for her seat on a plane, Jada had become a symbol of resilience and justice, someone who refused to let the powerful trample over her. Her legal victory wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a statement to the world, that no matter how powerful, how wealthy, or how influential someone may be, they could not escape the consequences of their actions. And that was something Jada would carry with her for the rest of her life. Months passed, and Jada's life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. But it was a new normal, one where she had learned the true meaning of standing her ground. The business world had taken notice. Investors who once hesitated to partner with her now sought her out, eager to be associated with the woman who had stood up to one of the most powerful men in the industry and won. Jada's company, once thought to be in turmoil, emerged stronger than ever. Her reputation was solidified as a woman of integrity, courage, and unwavering determination. And more than that, she had become an inspiration to countless others. Women and people of color in the business world who had been told for too long that they didn't belong, that they couldn't make it to the top. Her phone rang constantly with calls from other entrepreneurs seeking her advice, asking how she had managed to navigate the storm that had nearly taken everything from her. And with each call, Jada shared the same message. Stand your ground. The truth may take time to be heard, but it always rises in the end. She had learned that no matter how powerful or influential someone might be, they were only as strong as the truth allowed them to be. And Derek Finch, for all his wealth and connections, had been nothing without his lies. Sitting in her office one afternoon, Jada reflected on everything that had happened. The roller coaster of emotions, the tension, the fear, the hope, it had all been part of a larger journey. She had not only overcome a powerful adversary but had grown as a person in the process. She had learned that sometimes the fight wasn't about winning the most battles, it was about knowing when to stand up, when to push back, and when to expose the truth. And she had won. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Olivia, her lawyer, walked in with a smile on her face. "You did it, Jada. We've officially won the case. Finch is going down for good." Jada smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. "It's over," she said quietly. "But in some ways it's just the beginning." Olivia nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "What's next for you?" Jada leaned back in her chair, her eyes glinting with determination. "Next, I'm going to make sure that no one else has to go through what I did. I'm going to use my platform to fight for the ones who don't have the voice to fight for themselves. And I'm going to make sure that when people see me, they see a woman who stood her ground. A woman who never backed down." Jada Taylor's story became a defining moment in the business world, a testament to the power of resilience, justice, and the unwavering belief in the truth. It was a story of an underdog, underestimated and mistreated by a powerful figure, who turned the tables in the most unexpected and satisfying way. It wasn't just a victory for Jada, it was a victory for anyone who had ever been told they couldn't make it, for anyone who had ever been silenced, for anyone who had ever been made to feel small. In the end, the fight wasn't just about a seat on a plane or a man's lies. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully hers and standing tall in the face of adversity. Jada Taylor had proven that when you stand your ground, when you fight with everything you have, no one, not even the most powerful man, could take away what you've earned. And that was the most powerful victory of all. As Jada's story unfolds, one thing becomes clear. The fight for justice is never easy, but it's always worth it. If you've been inspired by her courage and resilience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel Racism Exposed for more powerful stories that shed light on the struggles and triumphs of those who refuse to back down in the face of adversity. What's your story? Have you ever stood up against injustice, even when the odds were stacked against you? Leave a comment below and share your experience. We want to hear from you. Let's continue the fight for equality together.